I've just been to the British Embassy, which is about 300 meters to the right of the camera. I'm now standing in the fortress of San Pedro. I've learnt the name, it's San Pedro. This is where the Portuguese first gained their control over the new territory of Angola in the 16th century. It was a strip of coastline which they'd extended their rule from West Africa, for example in Guinea-Bissau, and here they were now fortifying this coastline en route to India. I'm also being fortified with my knowledge about Angola because I've just come from the British Embassy. They've confirmed that I'm the only British traveller that they've ever met here in Luanda, because the country's got no infrastructure for tourism. There's poor roads with lots of potholes, driving is dangerous, there have been many accidents, and it's been confirmed to me that this country is being run by politicians who keep all the money for themselves. Their aim is not to be a millionaire per person, not even a multi-millionaire per person, but they all want to become billionaires. And because of the corruption and the greed, Britain does not give developmental aid to this country for two reasons. The country's rich enough to be able to develop itself, and secondly, the money would be misspent. And this brings me on to a question that I would like viewers to put as comments. I've asked this question to two members of staff in the embassy because I've been thinking about this for a few days now. We have Oxfam, WaterAid, helping poor people around the world. But how can we be motivated to give money from our pockets when the CEOs of Oxfam, for example, are on over £100,000 a year, when their charities are supplemented by volunteers working in the shops throughout Britain? How can we furthermore be motivated to give money to Oxfam or WaterAid or Save the Children Fund to work in Africa with people living in mud huts, drinking dirty water, when the politicians, the government officials in Angola have plenty of money to spend on the country by improving the roads, the sanitation, the electricity, and improving the living standards of the poor people, the masses? How are we going to be motivated to give money to charity when the politicians here have the wherewithal to raise the living standards? They can't even be bothered to spend money on improving the roads. All they're interested in is the oil platforms out there between here and Brazil, out in the South Atlantic Ocean. So please tell me on the YouTube channel what you think about the level of motivation it takes to help the poor people when the governments can help the poor themselves. A person once said to me when I was writing my booklets on human rights back in the 1980s, why should I give money to charity when the government should be able to feed their own people and improve their lifestyle by giving increased medical facilities? In some countries, the governments don't have the money. But when you analyse the wealth of every politician, it is beyond their pay receipt for official public service. They call themselves public servants throughout the world. The British government just told me we are dealing with 3/4 of the world politicians who are receiving too much money. Because when I watch television and hear the radio, and I know our prime ministers shake hands with dictators who say they've been elected but they want a third term, and the constitution says they're only allowed a second term. For example, the president of Burundi now is claiming lives because people are demonstrating against his desire to run for a third term. Africa, apart from one or two countries, is utterly corrupt. The governments are stealing the money from the people. They're billionaires, they have money in bank accounts, and I wonder why these bank accounts are legally allowed to exist in this world when there's so much poverty which could be cured. We had a campaign in 2000, didn't we? Make poverty history. That can only be done if politicians will only pay themselves what the public purse recognises. And the media like to make up a phrase, legacy of the Olympic Games. Well, there isn't any Olympic game legacy in Britain. We have an overweight problem. Second one was the Mandela legacy. There is no Mandela legacy because the present generation doesn't know what it was like to live in the apartheid era, and the present politicians, they're just taking money from the public purse to enrich themselves in South Africa. So there is no Mandela legacy. He was a one-off, a knight in shining armour, the political messiah that the world had been waiting for. But I'm afraid there's too much greed and self-interest amongst politicians, especially in Africa. So how can you, the audience, be motivated to give to charities that help developing countries, if you can call them developing countries, or even emerging nations? It's a disparaging comment to call them the third world, but they're certainly the less economically developed countries. So please tell me on the YouTube channel, how motivated should we be, or are you, in giving to help the poor when some of these countries have the wherewithal amongst their political structure to build roads, bring electricity to villages, improve sanitation, living conditions in hospitals and schools. Thank you for tuning in. Please give it some thought and add your comments.